Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, April 18th City Council work session. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and first up is the Clean and Green Gals. So you're going to have a presentation for us and let us know what's going on and what's happening, and
Right.
we're all yours.
Thank you. And I know you've got a full agenda. We'll only take about 5 minutes of your time, but we'd like to update you on our efforts here again this year for the Spring Litter Blitz.
You know, we're expecting, Arlene, once you're done, that everybody's just going to disperse because they're all here to watch you tonight.
Right. Okay, is that the case?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to leave after I'm done?
I think so.
But hopefully maybe we can get a few signups from this great group here that's of
You can do
concerned
that.
citizens.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yeah. First time, okay, great. But anyway, my name is Arlene Brandt Jensen, and this is Chris Fye. We are members of the Clean and Green Committee. It's an H2O20 committee. We've been going for quite a while, and some of the H2O20 committees have kind of gone by the wayside. We've been going here since 2013. So this is our 4th annual Spring Litter Blitz.
Well, basically, the goals of Clean and Green, very simple. Decrease litter and increase recycling. And we think the litter blitz is obviously for the litter. Clean up our town, make it look beautiful before graduations. And we'd also like to recycle at that time. Some of the accomplishments of Clean and Green would be the litter blitz.
That's the public opinion group there, so. There's J.T. Fye on the left there, Chris's husband.
Other accomplishments have been recycling at Cook Complex and the Foundation Field, the stadium, the Anzer Soccer Complex. Also, we've started recycling, made recycling available at the Farm Show, the Home Show, Cookin' on Compesca, and National Night Out. And we've also been working with the zoo staff to have trash and recycle stations in Bramble Park Zoo.
So going on to the main reason we're here, take a look at some of these items. We got a $20 bill, a TV remote, a $100 bill. So what do these things have in common? They're all litter. We found all those things that's reported in previous feedback efforts. Of course, with the other things that are typical. Those are some of the unique items. This Spring Litter Blitz has been a wonderful community effort. Those are some numbers from the previous forms that we've gotten back where people have reported online and given us some feedback over the last 3 years. So totaling all that up, about 1,700 people volunteering about 3,200 hours. And of course, some of those people may have done it 2 or 3 years in a row. How many people in the audience? I know there's some. Doug Alvine. Some of you guys have helped out and have been very faithful supporters. So the details, Spring Litter Blitz. Oh, let me go back here. There we go. There we go. Coming Earth Day, April 22nd. That's this coming Friday. We're looking for volunteers. We still have signups available. Go to the city website, thewatertownsd.us, go to the community tab, and this is what it looks like. You see the community tab at the top? We're the second one there listed, and Shelley Evers has been great to help us get all this set up from year to year. And that's what the website looks like. The map has not changed from previous years, so we're still looking at the same zones. And if you click on the sign up form on that page, on the website page, you will see this form where you can put your group business and or all the contact information there. Then here is what is, as of this afternoon, what has been claimed, so that we have about 10 zones left. Actually, a few of those are already taken this afternoon, so we have 10 zones left. Still looking for a few more. There's some easy ones there, like Zone 27, the I-29 exit, the northwest quadrant. I could foresee the city council meeting at McDonald's for coffee, go out, do your little zone, and then the mayor could buy ice cream cones for everyone afterwards. That would work.
As long as he finds another $100 bill, so.
You could. Well, I was one who found a $20 bill one year, and then I treated my group to ice cream cones too. So anyway, we do want to thank our
We
partners.
want to thank our partners, the City of Watertown, Sanitation Street, the Mayor's Office, Shelley Ebbers for the map, Watertown Community Foundation, because we're having them, they're distributing vests and buckets and stuff like that to all the people that are signed up for this, and they're managing all of that. First District for the map, the Public Opinion for publicity, the Watertown Radio and KXLG for publicity. Everyone can get involved to pick up litter around your own neighborhood, and thank you to those who already do. Business owners can pick up and beautify their property. And remember, littering is against the law. We all know that. And let's keep Watertown clean and green.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I do know that Randy is going to be working with Watertown Ford.
Right.
I think Glenn and Darla are going to
Right.
do a zone. I think some of us will probably tag on with him.
That'd be
And I
great.
think that Don is going with the Rotary Club. So
Okay, great.
yeah, they're getting involved. And
Yes, thank you very much for your individual
sure,
efforts.
If I missed anybody, just scream at me.
Yeah, and you don't have
Dan-
to
Dan's going
do
with
it as a
Rotary.
group. You can do it, just take a bag and go out on your own with, and sometimes that's the best way. So
Perfect.
Thanks very
Thanks,
much.
ladies.
That thing you said you found, that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that was mine. Can you bring that back?
We can probably find you a different one, Randy. Not an issue. Okay, well, the next thing on the agenda is the update on Stony Point development. Shane, I'm gonna kind of turn this over to you and maybe give us just a little brief history of what happened, where we're at today, and what we expect to accomplish.
How far back in history do I start?
Well, not too far. I think what we do is let's go back just to the two different reports.
Yeah.
The original report, the second report, and then the third report.
Okay. So in March, the Planning Commission received another iteration of the Stony Point development plans and shared that with Respect Engineers for their analysis. They came forward with the report at the 11th hour for consideration of the Planning Commission. So city staff took that report and took the data that the design for the developer had done and wanted to do a comparison of what the two views were. So we hired SEH Engineering to do an independent analysis of what they saw that, with the two respective proposals or points of view. So we did that. We got that back here a week ago and did some reviewing, and when that went public, or that information was going public, we also shared that with the Respect Engineer and the developer's engineer, who is Austin Engineering, a local firm. So with that, SEH, they've each had now a chance to review SEH's report, and to this afternoon late, I received the two documents which I now passed out to you, which is kind of their spin on what SEH also or disclosed in their report. So you've got three reports in front of you, one prepared by SEH, kind of a iteration from Respect and Austin Engineering on their spins related to the SEH report. So with that, I'm going to introduce Rocky Keene from SEH, who did our independent review, and let him go through his information and how he came to his conclusions and observations of the report based on the information received on March 24. Then I suppose we'll go into the other two reports relative to that. So with that, Rocky?
Shane, excuse me, Shane, can I ask a question? Has everybody seen everybody else's work at this point?
I would say that the reports that we received today from Respect and Austin have not been shared with each other, at least not through my office. If they've exchanged information on their own independently outside of our office, I can attest to that, so. Okay, Rocky.
Working? Oh. Just a little bit who I am. I've been doing this for, actually at SEH, I'll have my 30th anniversary this February, so I've been doing stormwater management for quite a few years. And actually in South Dakota, I actually helped with Vermillion. I've helped write their stormwater ordinances a little bit. Jose down there, the city engineer. We had worked on a project in Brookings, kind of a statewide award-winning project. And then if you're familiar with the Roby Creek project, but I think most of you are, I actually started that, was the engineer at the beginning that finished up. So kind of have a pretty good history in the state and background in water resources engineering. So from that, so I kind of take a look at these based on that experience. And what I kind of do, the PowerPoint's kind of a summary more than going through the detail of the report and kind of how I took a look at it. And then obviously as we move forward, there's going to be some more dialogue. But what I was asked to do is basically review the two reports in context of the city's best management practice manual. So I wasn't really focusing necessarily on a lot of detail, you know, what's the pipe size, whatever, but how does it fit and did they meet the requirements of the best management practice manual? And there really are two components that I looked at. One was the water quality component of that manual, and then the other was the water quantity aspect of it. And I think the conclusion was with the water quality that you must have some kind of water quality controls in place. And then it was up to the city to review those and determine, you know, whether those were right or wrong or indifferent. There'll probably be a discussion of that. But the one catch that when I was looking for the water quantity, and that's kind of the next issue, is do we need detention ponding for different events? And it does indicate that, and I highlighted that may be required. So that was kind of the first flag to me. It says it's not an absolute. Detention ponding is not absolutely required, but may be required. So with that in mind, I kind of said, okay, what's the next step, and when would it be required? And there are a couple of items in the BMP manual that I want to highlight. One is that basically they're saying that a problem shouldn't be transferred downstream. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. You design something so that if you have a problem in the development, you don't want that problem to be pushed downstream somewhere. So that makes a lot of sense. So that's the first question you have to ask. Then the second question was, is there any regional drainage plan or master plan as part of this is this development part of something else and therefore help guidance? So and then that kind of asks the question, on the lake, is there past studies that potentially would give some guidance in that? So those are kind of the two things I ask, is that required? So with downstream impacts, one of the things that came up was, well, if the 100-year event occurs on the subdivision, what's the impact to the lake? And both, I think Shane and I came about this number independently, but it turns out that the change in volume on the lake is 0.0046 feet. And to kind of put that in perspective, it would raise the water surface elevation like 2 pieces of paper. So again, the kind of my conclusion based on that was there probably was no impact from a volume standpoint that was going to transfer downstream. The other question was, if you do the project or don't do the project, will it make any difference? And because of the minimal amount of volume and the timing and all kinds of factors, again, I concluded that whether you have detention or don't have detention, it really wasn't going to make any impact on the lake. So again, that kind of calls into that, do you need detention or not criteria in the BMP manual. So then I just kind of looked, well, does the lake actually have a regional detention? There's just a couple points here. And there's obviously been some studies in the past that determine the high water elevations in the lakes, the water quality of the lake. So there is a history of looking at that watershed with the lake as the centerpiece. The other thing that kind of caught my attention, if you look at how the flood elevations are determined in the lake, they aren't determined on a model, but they're actually determined historically. So they take years and years of record of lake elevations, and based on that, they say this is a 10-year, this is a 100-year, this is a 50-year. That's the information that was used in the flood insurance. So again, it kind of leans you towards it's a big site, it's a regional type concept, just because of the way they determine those elevations. And then the last piece, again, obviously the site is actually already part of the watershed, and I know there's some discussion of whether it goes directly into the lake or not, but the bottom line is it is in that watershed. So I kind of concluded, and again, this is based on the BMP manual and how it kind of sets up, that there's a possibility that the lake is pretty good chance it's providing regional detention for this watershed from that perspective. So then I just really quick go through it. I was asked to review the actual computations that were done, assuming that detention is required. And again, these are kind of the key points that I looked at: pre-development, hydrology, post-development, the storage volumes, what it should be for, and there's like a bunch of bullets here, and I'll kind of skip over those and go in a little more detail. So first of all, there was kind of a discussion of the pre-development hydrologic conditions. So in other words, they were trying to determine what the runoff was from the site, what it is today. And there were a couple different factors used. The BMP manual is very clear. It says use a factor of 0.3, and the developer engineer used a factor of 0.45. And that kind of came up in the review of respect. And I guess I tend to agree. The manual's pretty clear that you need to use the 0.3 value. So again, and from a review standpoint, that's a pretty solid review. And at that point, and that can be discussed, but it's clear in the manual you're supposed to do that for existing conditions. And kind of the background on that, where you kind of run into is if you don't give a value, this is kind of what happens. Everybody interprets it a little bit different, and you can interpret it to a benefit of your site or not to your site. And again, the advantage of the BMP manual actually specifying a value is it kind of takes away that ability to kind of negotiate the existing conditions. And I was talking to actually Shane, I said, hey, when I looked at the map, there's a bunch of woods and trees, and he says, well, I think those have been cut down and changed. So you can kind of see how you can change existing conditions if you don't have a number. So kind of a background, I think there is some validity in having that value set. And then post-development, they both agreed the numbers were fine, how they calculated it. And then really quick on the 2-year and 100-year storage, again, in the manual, there's a couple different ways of doing it, and there's kind of a discussion of which was right and wrong. And again, I kind of felt that they could be recalculated to be more consistent with the BMP manual, and it wouldn't really affect the design much, so that's kind of was my recommendation. And then the other thing is, there's a couple different ways to do it, and they did kind of a pure engineering, which is called a hydrograph method, and they both looked at it 2 different ways. And I always, the interesting about hydrology and doing this so long, there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at the same thing, and you kind of have to weigh what's in the manual, what the city perspective is, and different things. And so again, they both looked at it different ways, and so you have to kind of weigh to say, okay, they're both right, they both could be wrong, they could be somewhere in between. So it's kind of a challenge in a review standpoint to look at that and then look in the BMP manual. So I kind of looked at them, I said this probably would make sense for the developer maybe to look at theirs again, just to double check it, because it was some inconsistencies with what Respect was showing. And again, it was just kind of a recommendation because of the different methodologies in the BMP manual. And then the last thing is another thing that came up was a discussion of, well, you have to design for a 2-year and 100-year storm. And again, from a technical standpoint, it's, well, what is a 24-hour storm? Does it rain constantly for 24 hours? Does it not rain, drizzle for a while and then spike? And so again, you can kind of see when you get into design, there's like a bazillion different storms that you can use. And there is some guidance in the manual on which ones to use. But I think the key was the manual really clearly is focusing in on a rainfall. They want you to use a rainfall amount over 24 hours, but they really don't tell you how it's going to rain over that 24 hours. So that kind of goes in this whole which is right, which is wrong in discussion of the design. And again, it's kind of a discussion. What my recommendation was, again, you might just want to look at it again because there are a couple different ways of looking at it. So I don't think either one's right or wrong. But a lot of time in my business, it's not bad to come at it from a different directions. And if you get nearly the same answer, it's a probably pretty good idea you're in the ballpark. The last thing and kind of as we kind of wrap up a little bit, the other thing I really looked at was, well, what's the real intent of the detention ponds? And it's very clear in your BMP manual. The 2-year storm is to reduce downstream erosion, and the 100-year is to reduce damaging floods downstream. So then you got to kind of ask the question, okay, what's downstream of this site? Well, there's no streams, there's no channels, because it's a direct discharge into the lake. So the 2-year kind of comes into play as whether it's really a factor to design for. And then again, the 100-year I kind of hinted at, when you only have a 0.0046 foot increase in the lake, it's kind of that discussion of, well, really, what was the intent of putting in detention ponds? And it looks like in this case, maybe the intent of the BMP manual doesn't necessarily 100% apply in this case. And then the other question, again, going back to the regional facility, is again, what is the lake in that play? And again, that's more of a policy discussion. But I kind of feel that the lake itself does provide that regional aspect. And then the last point that came up in their whole discussion is, where do you set the pond volume, bottoms of all these ponds? And there's a lot of discussion on what that elevation should be, and what happens when it rains, and where's the lake at when water's running off the subdivision. And again, the BMP manual has no discussion on this whatsoever. So then it kind of relies into either a quote common sense, or what the city's done in the past, or what kind of makes the most sense from a design standpoint. The one thing that Respect did do is they talk about a 10-year lake elevation, which I'm not quite sure where that came from, because it's not mentioned in the BMP and it's not mentioned in their storm sewer design, but the only place it's mentioned is in the flood insurance study. So there's no real good link back to the BMP manual, I didn't feel. And then I kind of said, well, if there is no link, what would I recommend? And again, if my reference is the BMP manual, the only storm that's in it is the 2-year storm. So that would be a good reference point. But the developer also looked at potentially ordinary high water elevation in the lake. In other words, that's kind of a guideline of where it would get deep and compared to the flood elevation. And as we kind of were thinking about it, what we'd like to do in water quality, and when we design these ponds, which these really are water quality ponds, a lot of times kind of the guidance is we try to capture 90% of all the rainfall events that occur over time. Is kind of a good guidance. So like in this area, I believe it's less than an inch. So if you took all the rainfall that ever occurred, 90% of them will be less than 0.8 of an inch or 0.9 of an inch. So it's kind of a guidance. So you could kind of take that same criteria for the lake elevation, say, you know, if we're looking at kind of a probability event, let's make sure that the ponds are above 90% of all the lake elevations that would ever occur over time. So it might be another guideline. And I didn't have a chance to compare that to the ordinary high water elevation, but I'm guessing it's a little bit below that. But again, there's different gauges that I think you could weigh it on than just a 10-year from that standpoint and under guidance. So, and I guess that's kind of my summary. And I guess at this point, maybe if there's any questions on my review,
I think, Rocky, what we'll do is, as a group, you know, they're going to just fire some questions at you. There's been 2 years worth of questions on this thing, so I think there's going to be a bunch. If I may, just the first one, when you talk about the 24-hour rainfall, is that the 5.5 or 6 inches of rain? Is that correct? Am I right on that?
The 100-year rainfall is 5.76, I believe,
that's what it was.
inches. And I guess is that an hour rate, or is that a rainfall for the day?
All it is a day.
Okay.
Basically, in a day, it's going to rain 5.7 inches, but there's no discussion on how that 5.76 inches occurs over that day.
All right, and then the last thing that I would like to mention, you talked a lot about quantity, but you really didn't touch on quality.
Yeah,
very
well,
much.
kind of what, again, when I was initially given the information to review from both, there was no discussion of water quality in either one of those per se. So my initial thought process was that it was fine, that it had been reviewed by the city and everything was okay. And then the real issue was the detention ponding discussion, the 2-year, 100-year, and how that relates to the lake. And then I actually received another document today, a previous report, and we kind of reviewed that today, and it looks like that report kind of concluded that the water quality probably appeared to be okay in that review. So I guess the default, it appears, and Shane can kind of clarify, but the city was under the impression that the facilities that were put in met the water quality standards of the BMP manual.
Yeah, I would concur with that, that the initial issue that came out of the fall meeting at the planning commission was that there was question on the 100-year storage, not the water quality. So all of this review and discussion has been focusing on more, it validated that the water quality appears to be have been met, and also then focused on a greater part whether on the 100-year detention portion.
I guess just to add there, the only dialogue a little bit from the water quality standpoint is the elevation of the ponds in relationship to when an event occurs. If the lake's at a 100-year elevation, super high water, and a rainfall occurs in the subdivision and that runoff goes directly into the lake because there's no detention, is there water quality? And then that kind of comes back to that concept of 90%. Even when we build water quality ponds, we know we can't build them for every single rainfall event, so we target specific rainfall events to treat the water for. So from that perspective, it's kind of that discussion of what's the probability of a rainfall on the subdivision when the lake's at 100-year, and it's probably pretty high.
Rocky, I had a couple questions right here.
Yeah.
You know, you quantify, that was one of mine, was going to quantify the 2-year and the 100-year water events. What is a 2-year? If the 100-year is 5.76 inches, what is a 2-year?
It's 2 something, I don't know.
Yeah, it's in the like 2.5 inch range. I don't know what that is right off the top of my head, Mike. Sorry.
Okay. The next question I had was in regards to the pond elevations. Is that elevation the point at which water would run over the top of the pond?
Oh, here's the answer. It is 2.86 inches. I didn't, from the design perspective, the way the outlets are designed is that they're designed for a 2-year, and then they're designed for a 100-year to overflow at different elevations and different functions. And I guess quite honestly, I didn't really review specifically how they function from that perspective, and maybe.
Well, I think that's probably a question for Austin. It's their design. They should probably.
You got two dimensions. You got 2 elevations. You got the bottom of the pond,
Right.
or you got the side of the pond.
Right.
Which one
So
are we
there's a small
referring to?
pipe that carries the 2-year event through the bottom
it's
of the pond, and then there's an overflow structure that at the 100-year event.
Okay, and that's the one that we're most concerned with, is the 100-year event?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think their design was, and they can clarify, but it looked like it was a kind of a standpipe with a bunch of little holes in it, so that when you got like an event, this water would slowly be released from the ponds, and that provides the water quality benefit. And again, that was part of the design that appeared to be accurate or adequate based on the BMP manual, which has some pretty specific guidelines on how to do that.
Rocky, I have a question about the best management practices. Everything I've read where it keeps referring back to that. Are those outdated? Are they too strict? Are they not strict enough? When's the last time those have been reviewed?
Well, the manual was written in 2008, and we've had, Shane and I have had this discussion if maybe they need to be revisited. And having done this for quite a while, kind of there's 2 schools of thought. This is kind of the school of thought, a lot of design in it. The manual says how to do this, how to do that, how to do that. The technology and lots of stuff. We've got a lot of new stuff coming online that's for design all the time. So the problem is if you get too restrictive in your manual, then the question becomes, well, what if this is a really good idea that was used someplace else? Can I use it? And you kind of get in, well, it's not in the manual, but can we use it? So, so the question is it outdated? It's probably consistent with a lot of stuff. But the biggest challenge now is there's a lot of flexibility in it when you look at it in an interpretation. So, and then the other challenge is, and I had the conversation with about is the challenge is, as a reviewer from a city standpoint, if there's a lot of stuff in there, it becomes really tough to review it from that perspective. So one thing you like to do is kind of condense it down and make it a lot simpler to review, or provide guidance in how specifically the city wants to review it, so the developers understand when they send something in, this is how they're going to look at it. Therefore, we need to be aware of that. So it's not necessarily outdated, but I think it's got a lot of stuff in it that probably needs to be tweaked and shrunk down a little bit and condensed from that standpoint. And there's just a lot of new stuff out there that provides water quality benefits that aren't even addressed in that manual. So.
Rocky or Shane, does the proposed channel have any impact on the quantity quality issue? I mean, does the channel enhance or detract? What impact does that have on our discussion here?
Kind of what my thought process kind of shifted a little bit on that, to be honest with you, because I was kind of looking at specifically the ponds themselves initially. But then as I thought about other similar projects where you've had a big water body adjacent to a development, a lot of times what they look at when they have flood storage is if you're impacting it, potentially you can mitigate the lake itself. So in other words, potentially increase the storage volume of the lake as part of the project if it's a potential. So even though it's a minuscule amount, where it relates potentially is then if you were to dig a channel, that potentially is volume mitigation for the lake. If you're increasing the runoff to the lake, could be considered part of that from that standpoint. The other thing is potentially depending on, again, there's going to be a fisheries discussion and some other things, which I'm not a fisheries expert, but I've also potentially, a lot of times when we design water quality benefits, we like to put in, say, a forebay or something where we can collect some of the pollutants before it heads out into a lake. Potentially, you could make an argument that that has some potential for pre-treatment before it goes into the big body of the lake, because it's going to kind of confine some of the pollutants. So there's some side benefits that really, that's a personal opinion, that as you kind of, not that it's pro or against the project, but it's kind of, there's some potential benefits that could be discussed, or there could be some then downsizes to that. Obviously, if you're using your channel as a water quality improvement channel, it's probably going to not take a certain level of maintenance then as part of that operation too. And again, that's what, okay, so if we dump a bunch of pollutants in there, what's going to happen to it? Is it going to grow vegetation we don't like, and then we're going to have to treat that? And so it's, as much as we like to predict things, we always can't. There's always a side issue sometimes. So, but it could have both, you know, benefits, and from a volume standpoint, it potentially could. So, water quality, maybe, or maybe not.
Rocky, I think that's what a lot of people are interested in tonight, is making sure that the water quality is handled. And do you think these retention ponds, are they going to be able to generate that water quality that everybody wants, so the lake isn't affected by this?
If the BMP manual's followed and the city review is correct in saying they will, the BMP, again, we cannot protect for every single rainfall event. So if, like I said, if we target 90% of all the rainfall events will go through the ponds, get treated, that's consistent with all the water quality. So to answer your question is, if they're designed correctly, they meet the BMP, they're above probably the OHW elevation is what they're targeting, they will provide a water quality benefit to the lake. Obviously, there's going to be times where the lake hits a 100-year elevation where backwater is going to come into them, and there's going to be some issues with that. But you have to kind of, you're never going to be able to protect against anything, every event, no matter what. Because like the conversation, if we have a 100-year event, there's probably stuff coming into the lake from other sources that this probably is the least of your worries at that point. But from a purely stormwater BMP standpoint, if they're designed according to your BMP manual, they will protect the lake as long as they're high enough above an agreed upon high probability event. So,
and by protecting the lake, you mean with or without the channel? Is that what you're saying? Or are you, you lost me in that
I'm sorry,
jump.
I was looking at it originally without the channel not being a factor.
Okay.
Again, that would just be their on-site BMPs if they meet the BMP manual and they're above that 90% probability event, they will provide what the purpose of the BMP manual was, which is to protect downstream bodies from water quality protection, because you're going to get most of them. And then part of it is there may be, as kind of a side issue with my experience, some of the potential things that came up with flushing, will a 100-year go through and flush all this stuff out? Some of those are just design issues that can be addressed, whether put in an emergency overflow that doesn't flush it out or bypass. I design a lot of stuff where they call the first flush, which basically all the dirty water goes into the treatment system, and then the big events, part of it bypasses because it's basically not dirty water, all of it by the time it gets there. That prevents some of those flushing things if that's a concern. So I guess from an engineering perspective, we could go back and look at it.
Just to be clear, it is kind of two different conversations.
I realize that.
So what Rocky's evaluating is the sizing and the appropriateness of the ponds only. The channel is a different discussion that he's not been asked to weigh in on.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure who I'm going to address this question to. I need to make sure I understand what has taken place going back to last fall. It was my understanding that the DENR stepped in and said that if you're not complying with your own local standards or your local ordinances, this project can't move forward. That's where it came to a standstill last fall. Okay, the developer came forward with some revised plans this spring now, and the Planning Commission at the meeting roughly 4 weeks ago approved those plans, and as part of that, we didn't quite have all the information I felt that we needed, but we did in effect say that the plans did pass muster relative to our local standards. Okay, so it's real. I'm not an engineer, obviously. I'm not an attorney, but this really boils down to a legal question, as I understand it. That I mean, is what is planned, does that pass muster relative to our local standards or ordinances? And am I correct? And that's the question that we ultimately have to answer now.
I think I understand where you're going, Glenn. I think what we're asking Rocky is the current plan that the developers have brought to us, is that good enough to go, or do we need to make some changes that SCH is kind of going between the two of the places?
And I'm not necessarily sure I'm addressing it to you, Rocky, or I guess I'm looking at you, Lisa, as our city attorney, because it ultimately is a legal question, as I understand it.
And I'm not sure what the legal question would be on that.
I'm going to start.
Me on that.
I'm going to start to try to answer the question. Okay, so we received the design plans and had from Austin that depicted whether or not they had the 100-year event reviewed correctly. And our initial review didn't indicate any red flags, so to speak, but respect challenged that. And Rocky has reviewed both of those, and he did find a few things from the engineer that could be identified as needing to be redone, and he stated that tonight. I think with respect to that, one of the documents we received late this afternoon is more information from Austin that's related to that, redoing that model. And Rocky has had a chance to briefly glance that over, but not in any detail or length of time. So we could either do one of two things. I could have Rocky in detail evaluate the new information brought forward, or do you feel confident in making a
I
discussion
think
point?
Kind of to follow up on that, when I was looking at the review, again, not that I felt like a lawyer sometimes. I was looking at this, which happens sometimes, but I was really looking, what did specifically the BMP manual say? And it's very clear from a water quality standpoint, you have to do some kind of water quality project. Then the city reviewed it and seemed to be okay. So that check mark is gone. The water quality has been met and everything looked good. Then it became this water quantity discussion, and was there any wiggle room in the manual or the ordinance? And it appeared to me that I found the wiggle room. It says may be required, and it's very clear that it's not an absolute. It may be required. Obviously, if something's a may be required, well, why would you want to require it? And it kind of went through that sequence of what's the risk downstream if you don't do it, probably from a legal standpoint. What would happen if we allow this to go forward? What can happen downstream? It appeared to me nothing really negative could happen downstream from a water quantity standpoint because of the lake and the low impact from that perspective. And that's kind of what you have to weigh. And when the city reviewed it, and you can clarify, but their impression was that's what they concluded too, was that the impacts downstream were not to a point where the detention ponding would necessarily, this would meet those requirements. And again, there is wiggle room in the BMP from the standpoint of the city staff has the ability, they can approve other methodologies that aren't listed in the BMP. That's where this developer fits in, what they submitted. It's just another method, and the city historically has reviewed plans based on that methodology and said it looks fine. So from that perspective, I think it's fine too. So again, the thing about hydrology, there's a little bit of, you kind of have to look at it. It's not an absolute. It's kind of how the city's done things in the past. Does it make sense? And I did not see any reason that what they did not make hydrologic sense per se.
Rocky, I got me again. The question I have is if we didn't have, there's obviously a lot of different ways that we could write and specify and create our BMP. Is that correct?
Yes.
A whole world of different options out there. If we were writing it today to govern the development within, I'll call city proper, non-lake areas versus the lake, would they be written differently? Would our requirements be what they are today for the lake, or would the lake be considered that pond, so to speak? What are most communities doing when their developments adjacent to lakes like this?
I would tend to agree that in this is such a unique feature that it would be in the best interest to probably not try to fit everything into the same criteria. So most communities would, like you said, look at the lake as a resource because the water quality potential for it is different than, say, it dumping into the Big Sioux. You know, that's a pure MS4 storm sewer pipe dumping into the Big Sioux is not the same necessarily as the lake because of the type of resource it is. There would be some potential benefits. A lot of communities have looked at those as different benefits and then adjusted their BMPs accordingly because you could make them more strict too if you thought the resource had more value. So there's some flexibility. And again, it may, I guess, Shane, you've been around the block a few times too, so that's kind of been my.
Yeah, I think what I want to do now is Respect here, or is there somebody here from? I'd like to maybe have Respect come up, give us your take on some of the information that you've seen on this SEH report, and then also just so you know, we'll give you some time here, and then I'm going to also allow us in the same time frame. So if you folks will give some respect here tonight.
Brad Johnson.
Thank you.
I'm a member of the Lake Compesca Water District. We hired Respect Engineering. A little bit of my background, I've spent 23 years trying to protect the water quality of Lake Compesca and raise money. We've spent over $10 million, well over $10 million trying to clean up this lake. This issue has never been about water quantity for us. It's always been about water quality. And also construction of a new channel, an artificial channel into the lake. And that's a policy decision for the city of Watertown. That sets precedents. You talk about your BMP thing, and you know, we've got a watershed, and I think we need to revisit the BMP manual, but we are very concerned about the water quality coming off of this. But
Okay,
now
Brad,
I'll introduce Pete.
Yes, please.
And this is Pete Roush. She's an engineer. We also have with us Julie Blackburn. Pete's from Rapid City. And Julie is from Minnesota. She's a lake quality expert.
Okay, so if you want to bring her up also, Julie, if you want to come on up, and then introduce yourselves again, and then we'll listen to what you got.
All right, yeah, I am Pete Roush. I'm a water resources engineer with Respec Consulting. I've been with Respec for 5 years. After I had went to school of mines for both bachelor's and master's in civil engineering and focused in water resources. Professional engineer in South Dakota as of last year. And I actually, I grew up in Big Stone City, so it's good to be back in God's country here.
I'm Julie Blackburn. I'm a director with Respec in the Water and Natural Resources area, and I work in water quality. I have a master's in ecosystem engineering and modeling, and have worked in lake water quality my entire professional career. Work on some of the most complicated lake systems in Minnesota.
Well, what we'd really like to do, and the intention of the memo that you received today, was really to consolidate and reiterate the key facts, the key issues that we identified in the November and the March reports. I want to go through those and just make sure that everything's clear. So I'll go through those, and yeah, once I'm through, we'd be happy to take any questions.
We'll probably let you go ahead and go through it, and at that particular time, then there will be questions. Have we got it so we can put this report up on the screen?
Just for Mayor, just for clarity, this is the report that they submitted at the March Planning Commission. That's
No,
up on
I
the
think-
screen, not the one.
I think what we're looking for is this report here today.
Yep.
That you just sent to us today.
And I don't,
Huh?
I don't know that we have that available electronically.
Oh, okay. Well, Kenny,
Unless-
he's putting it up on the screen.
Did you supply it to somebody else? Because it
No,
didn't come
no,
to.
it's just off
Oh,
the-
off the screen?
off the
Okay,
projector.
very good. Sorry, I'm not,
It's okay.
I can't.
We'll have to get you some kind of a periscope that'll reach around that thing. Yeah, we'll get your screen over here.
Well, yeah, now that we're looking at the memo, again, really what we want to do was, make sure we're giving all the findings that we've found, really just trying to present what we've found in a manner that, can be useful to the city council for making decisions. In the memo, we kind of go through the history of the plan submissions and our reports and SEH, and I'd like to really thank SEH for their review. I think, as they pointed out, there's some wiggle room in the BMP manual, and I think it's good to have that kind of discussion. So, yeah, just going through our bullets of key issues. First, the proposed grading for the site, and we kind of described the evaluation in our November report. But with the channel coming in and the grading as proposed, that changes the area of that site that is draining directly to the lake from 6 acres existing to over 20 acres. Now, accounting for that increase in the area draining directly to the lake, and then also accounting for the development of the site, the increase in the imperviousness, and the increase in stormwater volume that would come from that. Really, any storm event greater than the water quality capture event is going to discharge 5.5 times more water to the lake than existing conditions. I do want to point out this assumes that the internal ponds that are on the site right now, it assumes that they can handle those existing flows. And we did a little bit of analysis of that in the November report. It would require more information to really validate. I think this is a very important point. As Brad said, we've really intended to focus on the stormwater quality, the quality of the lake. And I want to point out that it's intuitive to us in the business, but all stormwater discharged to the lake, including that in excess of the water quality design event, does contain elevated pollutants, and the issue is that translates into pollutant loading. And really, with the current issues on Lake Kampesca, and really any lake, we're talking sediment and phosphorus are kind of the main concerns.
So if I may, and I apologize, I was going to let you finish this off, but when you're talking about that, you're talking about X amount of new residences that are using fertilizers and things like that.
That's
gonna
right.
be
All
going in.
it's all
Is that what you're saying?
typical urban use.
Okay.
Yeah, fertilizer, lawn clippings, pet waste. Yeah, it's pretty standard. Now, in our review of the manual, we found that the manual specifies the 2-year and 100-year storage volume must be provided on site in the absence of a regional drainage master plan. The manual goes back and forth between regional detention facility and regional drainage master plan, and I think it's important to point out a regional drainage master plan would normally evaluate. It would be looking at future land use in a drainage basin, and the changes that would come, the cumulative changes that would come from full development of the site, and the cumulative flooding impacts to a water body. And I would say when we're talking a lake, where anything that goes into the lake stays there. When we're talking water quality, pollutant loading, it goes into the lake and it'll stay there. So.
Can I ask a quick question? And Shane, I'd like you to weigh in on this. I think Rocky mentioned that it says it may require. It doesn't. This says it specifies that it must require. What is our BMP on that?
You must do the water quality, and Rocky made that clear. What's that question is, when we do the water quality or not, what if that has a subsequent impact on water quality? And I think Rocky made it clear that it's impossible to clean or provide clear water from every storm event. So we're still talking on parallel discussion points, but and Rocky's point and the point of our BMP manual, I think if we can cover that 90 percentile of the storms, we're doing way more than we have in the past. But
okay,
so
I apologize again.
Okay.
No, that's okay. And I would say that it was a little tough to pull this out because the manual does go back and forth a little bit in how things are worded. But I apologize. I don't have the manual in front of me, but we did find that basically as quoted.
Yeah, we do have copies of that. You've got that there also. Mike's got a copy here. If you wanted to point it out, it's entirely up to you.
I don't think I'd like to fumble through right now.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah, so, yeah, there again, a regional drainage master plan to evaluate future development of a drainage basin and the potential impacts, both flooding and water quality related, to the receiving water body. Those are all kind of overlying issues that aren't, some are clear in the manual, some are not. But to me, that's kind of a planning. Those are planning issues, and then we get into the specifics of the plans as we saw them. So the first is, as Rocky pointed out, we found that the proposed detention BMPs are undersized relative to the requirements of the manual, and to be clear, our March report focused, it sure seemed to focus on this detention and the flooding. The point of that review, and as we presented it, was really to point out going into the Plan Commission meeting that if these detention ponds are undersized as designed, it may require changes to the easements as proposed. That was the main purpose of that review. Now,
Just hang on. It may require changes to the easement. So your concern in that statement is the easements? Or is your concern the volume of water isn't being retained at an appropriate level?
I would say both. It's if if the BMPs, if the storage volumes are undersized, and it's all done based on frequency and really accommodating an acceptable risk. And if the ponds are undersized and they experience, you know, the storage volume that they're designed for, if it's undersized, will happen more frequent than intended, and that could cause issue. It could overtop more frequently. It would be one example of an issue with that.
Okay, so your concern really has nothing to do with the easements. That's an issue with the developer and whomever. It really is the proper retention of the water as required.
It's a
From an engineering standpoint, it would be the amount of water, correct?
yes, that's definitely
Okay.
it was one of the concerns. Well, I'll keep moving. So, as far as discussion about the BMP elevations relative to the lake elevations, there again was posed to point out and that this is a piece that's not specifically addressed in the manual, and as Rocky pointed out, that considering that Watertown has both streams and rivers, or streams and lakes, to address this more clearly would be helpful. So this is a point that's open to interpretation. And what we saw and what we presented in that March report regarding the elevations of the BMPs and using the 10-year, we really intended to use the 10-year water surface elevation of the lake just as a benchmark for comparison. After
What is the difference between the 10-year and the 2-year as far as height? I mean, if we go the 2-year or we go the 10-year, is there a large difference?
Well,
Can I, from the peanuts?
Sure, from the peanut gallery, is that what you
Peanut
said?
gallery. The 2-year flood elevation on the lake would have to be determined. I didn't determine.
Do you have Spencer, can you give him the mic?
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay. The actual 2-year elevation was not ever determined anywhere. It could be done because we have a 10, we have a 50, and a 100-year, and we plot it on probability paper, and then the 2-year elevation would come out. I don't think there is a 2-year elevation that's been recorded. It'd have to be determined. And again, and part of my review is I was just looking for something to link it back to the BMP manual as a recommended elevation. So it was kind of the thought process was if you did the 2 and then you looked at it in relationship to the OH, ordinary high water elevation, they may be similar, they may be way off. I don't know. I just know the 10 was significantly higher than the OHW, so. Oh, all right.
So we got the 10 and the 100 shown there.
So we could plot those two on what we call in engineering world probability paper, and we could come up with a 2-year. And I think there's a 50-year also. But there's a pretty detailed lake study that was done that determines those elevations, and it includes a couple other events that aren't shown.
Why don't you just hang on to it for a little bit there, Rocky? All right, Pete, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm losing track of my papers now.
You can hand that other packet to Rocky behind you, if you would, please.
Okay, I think I got it here now. All right, so talking lake elevations, as we presented in the March report, simply to show with the information that we had at the time, as a point of reference for discussion, the BMPs are below the 10-year water surface elevation. After getting that out and having a little more time to review, and as SEH had also pointed out, looking closer at these elevations, we found that four of the water quality BMPs are near or below the ordinary high water mark, and one's actually below the full lake level, and we're talking the bottom of the BMP, from which point the BMP would drain. with that, what we really wanted to point out is that the stormwater quality BMPs will not provide their intended pollutant reduction if.
So, just a quick question on the BMPs. Were you talking on the high water mark BMP, or are you talking a 10-year high water mark?
Can you?
Yeah, I said that wrong. Were you looking at the high water mark of the lake, or were you looking at a 10-year high water market or
Sure,
height
so
of the
I'll
lake?
say it again. Upon further review, 4 of the BMPs, the bottoms are below the ordinary high water mark, near or below the high water mark, within a couple tenths of a foot. And 1's below the full lake level. Does that clarify?
The ordinary high water mark.
Ordinary high water, that's what I was after.
Oh, excuse me.
Whether a 10-year, because I know the 10 year's been in there a lot, and I was just questioning, is it a 10-year or it's ordinary?
Mm-hmm. Okay, does that answer your question? I'm talking
Yes,
ordinary high
yes,
water level.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, again, to be clear, if managing the risk, if these water quality BMPs are inundated by elevated lake levels, they will not, provide the intended pollutant reduction if there's a simultaneous rain event on the site. And then in this new memo, we also clarify that it's the bottom elevations of all 7 stormwater detention BMPs are below the 100-year water surface elevation, and 5 are below the 10-year water surface elevation. And there again, if the stormwater detention BMPs are inundated, they won't provide the intended flood attenuation. So those are all my bullets of our kind of our key
And in the
findings.
shortness of time, if you guys don't mind, we're going to have another one of these also. I would like to get us and actually Bob, your people up to kind of defend your side a little bit. Then I think we're going to have to get all of us together again and say, where are we really at? What are we accomplishing here?
Can I ask that we not mess with the BMP stuff because I just started to understand it until we're all done with this?
One thing I'd like to see happen, and before we do meet again on this, is the fact that we're being handed these, and each other are handing them to each other a few hours before a meeting.
Yeah, and in defense of both sides.
Yes,
they both just
absolutely.
Kind of brought it in. But I think what we're going to do in the future here on this, we're probably going to have like an all-dayer, where we can have a lot of discussion on this stuff. And Shelley, you look excited at something like that. Yeah. So if you guys would give your side of it and kind of what you're looking at the SCH stuff also.
Well, my name is Rod DeYoung. I'm with Austin Engineering, and we did get a chance to review SCH report there, and we thought we'd just put together a letter, summarizing what they had in their report, just to clarify a few things, and probably also wanted to shed light on some of this bottom of the pond elevation too here that SCH kind of commented in part of their report was maybe we should be looking at the top of the weir elevation as well. So we did go out and shoot the elevation of that and compare it to our ponds. But 2 of the ponds on the very southern part has been eliminated and revised to a different location so that as far as those 2 ponds goes, being below the ordinary high water mark is kind of a moot point at this stage because the landowner to the south objected to it, so we had to revise that. So that's what we really looked at, as well as looked at the elevations of the rest of the ponds, and we'd have to do some revamping them just slightly to get them above that weir elevation. So, and that's about 11 inches above the full elevation of Lake Compesca. So just to clarify that part of it. So now, as far as one of the concerns was the C values used of the existing out there. I know the manual states that maximum is 0.3 out there, but when you compare that to the table and you see that here we are, we got a development that's going to be pretty steep grades out there, as well as development upstream of what this development's going to be taking water from. We thought that probably wouldn't be really realistic to compare that to. So, and that's why we used the C values that we did, you know, ranging from 0.35 to 0.45 versus 0.3, and did our analysis from that aspect of it. And then also the comment was talked about, you know, which method should we use? So what we did, we went in there, we've been using the rationale method for these small drainage basins, which is under 100 acres. This is around 6 acres maximum for that. And we've been doing it that way for years and years and years, and it's been working very well for us. So we compared it to the second method that was mentioned in the manual, which is what they call the SCS method, or present day NRCS method, type 2 rainfall, and used that over the recommended 40 hours of rain, your storm, and then the peak at 12 hours. We found some differences, but it was marginal, and you can see that in my report here. So we did that comparison on that.
Explain that hydrology thing.
Do you guys have that you can put it up on the screen? Perfect. Something. I think they need to, I doubt if it's, I doubt if it's on there. I think,
you can
Bob,
use
need
this
to
one
put
on the
that up
screen.
on there, just put it on the screen.
You got it? Okay.
Right. There you go.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, this is the SCS, or pardon me, the rationale method there. And you can see that, you know, what the differences of the curve is. Yeah, granted, there's some things that's going on here, but the only thing that we can attribute that to is when the water level's coming up to the top of the pipe, you get to the top, then it drops down real quick, and then it builds back up to overcome the head of that. That's a brief explanation how that works. Same way on coming back down the other side. But that's a rationale method there. And, you know, the curve is at the beginning of the rainstorm there, is what you see there, is where that occurs. Now, if we went in and used what's recommended in the manual, here's the one that has it over a 40-hour period of the rainfall. And you can see we put it at 12 hours for the peak. And we find there's a little bit of differences, but the ponds, you know, as being going to be built, they're oversized enough to take in account that differences in the performance of the ponds. So that explains the differences in it too. So it's only minor. We checked all of it. The one that had the largest differences was our what we called Area A, which is no longer there anymore. But it was like 2/10 of a foot, which is about 2 1/4, 2.5 inches, right in that range. Just give you a perspective on that. So, you know, whether you do the rainstorm at the beginning of the curves or in the middle, this is what we found here. And we will do the analysis on all of them just to verify that, to make sure it would work. So. What's that?
The water coming in and the size at 550.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say that when he calculated these pound values for retention, he also figured how much water was coming in to those ponds and going out at the same time.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to take that.
What we're talking about there is that when you have these ponds in there, you know, it's just like with SCH is that the manual specifies you got to have this volume. That's if you put a gate at the outlet and let it fill clear up, and then open the gate up and let the water out. Well, these here ponds, you know, it's what we call routing, is when you have the rainfall event coming at the first part of the storm, you have water coming in, you're going to have water running out. And that's the way you determine your pond size. As water's running in, water's running out, and that's why you get the peaks of that. And you determine the storage volume and the difference of the areas of the curves. And then you keep rerunning. It's kind of like a trial and error basis that you do that.
I see, Rod, in the respect report on the very bottom, it says that this assumes that existing internal ponds are capable of retaining without releasing. So what you're saying is just the opposite. You're expecting some release through that time. Pete, can you respond to that? Can you give him that microphone, Rocky, and let Pete just respond to why would you have no release? I'm curious of that.
The difference on that is that the existing
Is that mic
ponds-
on? I don't hear you very well, Pete.
Can you hear me okay? Gotta be closer to my mouth, maybe?
Yeah, can you hear me now? There you
Yeah.
go. I hear you.
Okay, so that evaluation, the difference between the two, a stormwater pond, detention pond that's designed, is designed to capture and release, where the existing ponds are basically just holes in the ground with no design. And the further analysis that would be warranted would be, at what elevation do they release? And at that point, how much are they capable of storing? That was the intention.
Well, but would you agree that their ponds they're designing will release as it's coming in also?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep,
all
that's
All right, I
normal.
was just curious, because I see it says here without releasing. I'm curious as to that point.
Yeah, without releasing is specific to the existing ponds. And I'm talking up to a 100-year water, 100-year event. With what we had found, we laid it out in November. We did a quick evaluation of the.
So where are these existing ponds? I guess I'm missing that one.
Put
Shane,
mine
help me
on the
out.
screen.
Are you referring to the ponds
up there?
as are designed or something that exists today?
He's talking.
I'm using
Okay, I
the
think
word
Shane's got
pond
it. Okay.
loosely there.
Let me.
Okay, Shane, you got
Okay.
the floor.
All right. So what they're referring to is this little area right here that I'm circling with the pointer is a depression within that subdivision that acts as a natural storm pond. And that's where their reference also to the, that's where their discrepancy in their 6 acres versus the 20 acres is kind of part of that discussion as well. Because a lot of this existing site does drain to this depression, but ultimately.
Hold on a minute until they're done over here, then we'll get started again. You guys ready? Okay. Go ahead.
So ultimately, as Rocky pointed out, all of that water does eventually make it to the lake in some fashion, whether it soaks in or whatever. It's the lake level is aquifer driven, so any water that lands upon it or drains to the lake ultimately reflects the aquifer level.
Right.
So
would you say that pond that is right there that you're talking about, was that earth removed to build the berm
Might-
over by Hidden Valley?
it's hard to say. It's a potential.
That was actually a crappie rearing pond that was man-made, and it's been actually non-jurisdictional, it was ruled by the Corps of Engineers. So it was just man-made. It's actually, higher than the lake elevation at this
Okay.
time.
Yeah, I was just confused. We got different ponds here, some that are being
Right.
made and some that are existing.
If you use the gate method that he was talking about on the ponds and held everything, Rod did a comparison on one of the ponds without considering the water that's going through it. It would have to be 550% larger to contain that compared to what's going out.
Okay, continue on, Rod. I'm sorry about that.
No, that pretty well summarized our report with SCH. I do agree with quite a number of things in their report. There are a few things that we can iron out, in our final stages of the project. Like working with the landowner to the south there where we had them other ponds. He did not want that, so we had to come up with a different configuration of the ponds there. And I did give Shane a copy of that, but I don't know if he's had a chance to review that as well yet.
So let me ask you this, with the 3 of them here, we got Respect, we got Austin, we got SCH. Do you think you 3 could sit down at the table and work this out and get things squared away and we'd be able to get it done, like by tomorrow? But I mean, what do you guys think? To Respect, you could sit down at the table with them and work this out with SCH and Austin. Could we get it done? Think we could all come to a happy medium on that?
I'm sorry, did I hear you say we should discuss this?
Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because I think that's the only way we're gonna get this done. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well,
Mayor?
the one thing that I've heard pretty much is the volume of water is kind of gone by the way. That isn't the big hassle. It's a concern of the quality of water that gets into the lake. So if people just could confine their work and their efforts to that, I think let's not keep getting drifting off on something that doesn't seem to be an issue, and that's on the volume. As long as I understand the volume has an effect on whether it's going to overrun in the quality, but basically whether these ponds are going to be able to take care of the quality issue, that to me is the only question I have in my mind.
Well, if I might, the 100-year retention controls that volume. That's, do you want the 100-year retention or not? You know, that's kind of the basis of where you have to kind of start from.
It is. And Shane, what's your opinion
Well,
on that as far as the city goes on it?
That topic alone is still, if you read the two reports, if you read Austin's stuff and Respect's response, they're not the same because there's different ways to review and handle the hydraulic analysis, and Rocky made that point fairly clear. So I don't know what you want for an answer. There has to be, we have to decide what is right.
So I think what you're asking is that the council here needs to make a decision at some point,
Or-
whether they go 2 years, 100 years.
There's only one other thing that I would maybe ask SEH if they're willing to do, and I guess now they've heard all of the information from both sides. Austin did prepare this new hydraulic information. It's only for one of the ponds. If they were to complete that analysis for the remaining ponds, I would ask SEH if they were willing to be an independent arbitrary review of that and determine if they think that we're holding back enough water or not for storage. Does that make sense, Rocky, or is that? Right, but now let's cut to the chase though. We have to decide what the proper size of the ponds are. I have one guy that's saying it needs to be 5 times larger. I have one guy that says this is adequate. How am I to independently evaluate which one of those is correct? This is my only way, is to find an independent person that's willing to weigh in on that and give me the direction, because otherwise my hands are tied to either method or not. And that's why I chose to bring an independent party in here to evaluate and boil down what the issues are. And I think, to be fair to everybody in this community, SEH is the most neutral in this discussion, and I would respect their opinion to be non-biased and give us some direction on what the final storm
Right.
storage would be.
Were you going to bring along somebody from South Dakota State, that fishery?
I couldn't get a hold of him to come
We're going
to
to
this
have to
meeting,
address
so, but we need to do that at some
That's
point,
something
yes.
that we're going to
So-
absolutely have to address. So I think we need to get the
Okay.
volume taken care of.
Right, okay, and either with or without the channel, the volume discussion needs to be finalized. And then
Let's get that process
the channel's a
started.
whole different discussion.
Let's find out if, Bob, Austin Engineer, are you good with that? Brad, is Respect good with that? You guys okay with that?
Could we have Shane sit on it too? Could we have Shane sit on it too?
It's entirely up to you, both groups, if you want.
May need a referee, you know?
Yeah, I'd love to learn.
Right.
Learn everybody's perspective was helpful for me in the future.
John, I seen you shake your head, yeah, you think that's okay? Yeah.
Now, my only thing
Well,
with,
Let's let him talk really
Okay.
quick.
all right,
That'd be a first.
I'm no engineer, and we've each hired engineers because the city engineering department isn't in the league to be able to establish this. What this record has shown today is that your best practices manual needs help.
It is, it's antiquated,
Okay.
I would agree.
And I'm sitting here going, you know, I don't want to get into a legal fight with the city over this. I don't personally have a problem with Bob developing the property, but I'm not the oldest lake resident here tonight, but my family probably is. And I am absolutely against anything that's going to destroy the water quality. I've been working with the Lake Kempesca Water Project District since its inception, and we put in riprap, and we put in a weir, and we've been at the forefront of trying to control flood control through Mahoney Creek, which has not been resolved yet. So all of these things come into play, and I look at Bob's plan and I think, I go, you know, if he didn't put the channel in, all of this crap goes away. And we don't have to worry about water quality. We don't have to worry about water quantity. We don't have to worry about whether he can proceed with his project. But if Bob keeps the channel there and insists on having it, then
Right.
all of these
But I think
professionals are
John,
have to get it together.
I think if it's okay with both groups, then we will get all three groups. We'll get them together and see if we can't get the volume thing taken care of, the ponds taken care of. Let's get that started. Let's get that finished up. My suggestion is that we get that done as soon as possible. We'll get another meeting set up before the next council meeting.
Okay.
'Cause we need to keep this fresh and under our
Okay,
brain. Keep it
and that
going.
leads me to the comment that I was going to make was, we need to, I mean, this is a new twist to this scenario with SEH. And I think what we need to allow to happen is Rod's gonna have to do his reiterations on all of his pond location calculations, provide that to me. And once I receive it, I will provide it to Respec and to SEH, let them review it for a couple days. And the only thing I don't know or even have a clue is how busy Rocky Keene is. I mean, Rocky, do you have, I mean, what kind of schedule do you got? You're gonna be up here for at least a day, it sounds like to me, but we'll try to let you do as much as you can in your office, but then you're gonna have to dedicate at least one whole day up here.
Well, I think we can get that worked out. I think we're all in agreement that we need to have more time studying on this
Okay,
thing.
so-
Let's
that's
leave it
the
at that.
track.
We work it out with the three groups and get something done.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yeah.
We had the water quality lady here, didn't get a chance to speak at all, and I think, I'm
Well,
hoping
we
then that.
haven't got much time, and if you can do
I'm
it.
hoping that she can either say something tonight, or she can be at this meeting, because I think that quality is the issue.
Thank you. Yes, I would be happy to work with everybody on looking at the water quality. I'm not familiar with having lakes be referred to as regional detention facilities. So I think that some of the water quality issues and what it means for the fisheries, and obviously this is a valued resource. There's so many people here and you've been talking about it for so long, and the water quality is important. So I'd be happy to work with everybody on it.
Perfect, and I would agree that you should be involved. But I don't want anybody to think that we're taking this lightly, because, you know, this is a major deal for Watertown. But I am going to adjourn this meeting. We'll be back at 7 o'clock for city council. Shane, if you get them lined up and get them squared away, we need to have this as soon as possible to get back. If we need to call a day meeting, let's do it and get it done. If somebody can't make it, we'll Skype them in.
Your Honor, is this off the calendar then for the city council meeting tonight?
There's nothing on, no. And we do have, I believe, is it 60 days that we have to have something accomplished, or 90 days?
Thanks.
Mike Roush?
Mike Roush, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah,
I got
I kinda can't think of his brother. His brother was there too.
Shoot, I should know that, because we work with Dakota
You know
Grant. Yeah, because we work with Dakota Grant up in Millbank, and they've got such a close tie to Roush Brothers. In fact, we had our daughter's tombstone design made by Roush Brothers.
Oh, I gotta get a napkin or something. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I went to college for like 4 years.
John Wiles.
You okay?
Okay. At this time, I'd like to, are you guys on? All right. Welcome to the Monday, April 18th, 2016 City Council meeting. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and we will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me, Dan.
Okay, Shelley, if you will do roll call for us.
Albertson. Bueller. Danforth.
Here.
Manti. Riefenberger.
Here.
Roby.
Here.
Solom.
Here.
Thorson.
Here.
Tepper.
Here.
Billhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I will look for a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. Motion by, was it Bruce? Yep. Second by Beth. Any questions, any changes? Hearing now, look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, approve the agenda. I'll need a motion and a second for that.
Second.
Motion by Randy, second by Brad. Any questions, any changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I do need to take a little quick break here. Dan Albertson, if you'll meet me out front out here.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Tracy, bring your
Nothing worse than a council pink slip.
Hey, thanks for serving. Well, Dan, I have a plaque to give to you. This is presented to Dan and Sandy Albertson as the Coach, Player, Media Interest Supervisor of the Year of 2016 for the State A Girls Basketball Tournament. Mr. Carney brought that to us.
Crap, we don't get that.
Just a little update on that. Wayne Carney brought me that, and he thought Dan and his wife did a fabulous job of watching the gates at the State A tournament, and he thought they deserved a plaque on that. So there you go, man. Way to go. Okay. Number 3, application for a new retail on-off sale wine license to Harry's Haircuts and Hot Towels, LLC, doing business as Harry's Haircuts and Hot Towels at 16 West Kemp. This is an additional license for other wines. Right now, all he has is a South Dakota farm wine license. This will allow him to put in many, many other types of wines in his business. So at this time, I will open the public hearing if there's anyone here that wants to speak in favor of or against this. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. I will look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Bruce or John, second by who? Glenn? Okay, Beth. You guys got to use your mic so I can hear you. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, just wondering, why wasn't this presented to us along with the other one a couple weeks ago or whenever it was?
Yeah, what he had was the South Dakota farm wine license, and he's had tons of requests for other types of wines, you know, the good box stuff. I'm sorry, Glenn. Did that help you out on that? I don't think he really knew that he wanted to do those other types of wines. I think he thought that at the time he was just going to represent the South Dakota wines. Any other questions? Hearing none, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 4, second reading of ordinance number 1605, amending the zoning district boundaries by zoning property west of 5th Street Southeast C3 Highway Commercial District. At this time, I will open the public hearing if there's anyone that wants to speak in favor of or against this. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Are you guys all familiar with this particular one? This here's where the theater wants to go down to. They need to change the boundaries on this particular thing. Is Shane still around, or did he ditch us? I don't really think there's a lot of questions. I do believe we want to get this moving forward for the theater, so
Good.
I'm going to go ahead and, if there's no questions by the council, I'm going to look for council action. All those, or is there a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to that, Steve, just to
Se-
let you know that the plan commission did
Right.
put that forward, so they were
Perfect.
very.
I'll
sensitive
second
to
that.
So I got a
I'll make
motion
that
by
motion.
Dan, and a second by Randy. Any questions?
I do the black section in the map. Is that just the vacation of the alley or the vacation of the street?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'll look
If I
for
would
council
scroll
action.
down,
All
I
those
guess
in
I
favor
would.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I'm glad you got that up there. Number 5, vacation of platted utility easement in the barge addition. At this time, I will open the public hearing if there's anyone in favor of or against this. This is your opportunity to talk. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mike.
Second.
Second by Glenn. Also, if you want to put that up there for us. I think it's the same thing that you had. Oh, that's right. This is the Derby Downs spot. I think you should be able to bring that up. This is up there right on the corner. There's not a map on that? Okay. Shane, we're on number 5. We need to have a picture of the area that we're going to vacate on that easement.
Okay, I'll use the existing drawing. The Brady edition, this is a Mike Stewart thing. It came to the Planning Commission last fall. He wished to replat these 2 lots. That's actually 3 lots. This property line extends across, making this 2 parcels. And on either side of that property line is a easement for utilities, and there are no utilities in there. Mike Stewart purchased all 3 properties, and through the Planning Commission, he was denied to replat. But what it still allows him to do is have 2 buildable lots. So he's going to build over this property line. And there's also an access easement and utility easement that follows either side of this line here. So this line across the 2 lots has no utilities in it. He's petitioned for that to be vacated, and that's what you're acting on today, is a vacation of that. And I apologize that the drawing wasn't attached. Luke Mueller, of course, is assisting us with that Planning Commission item, and for whatever reason, that drawing just didn't get attached.
I can't read the street change. Where is this
Okay,
at?
this is in Derby Downs area. So this is 28th Street Northwest, 3rd Avenue Northwest. And
Just to the east of that is the main road, isn't it?
right. Mike Stewart at one point owned all 5 of these lots, or 6, I guess, if this is 2 pieces, but he's trying to set himself up to build a house on this lot.
And they're going to access off that bottom road there?
Correct, yep.
And what bottom road is that? Again,
That is 3rd Avenue Northwest.
you see any issues with that cutting in there?
No, we actually talked to the utility company. They don't have any utilities within that easement. They're okay with the vacation.
Now, did you say the planning commission was against this?
They were against the replat.
The replat.
But he has buildable rights here, so he's just going through with his rights to build on those lots.
The replat was for 3 lots though, right?
It involved 3
was-
lots.
yeah.
So are you okay with this?
Sure. Yep.
Any other questions? I think we have a motion, a second on the floor. Hearing no more questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 6, resolution number 1613, a bridge reinspection program resolution to use the South Dakota DOT retainer contracts. Shane, if you want to handle that for us.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is a program that the city participates annually. We've currently split our bridge inspections between 2 engineering firms. One of them is Austin Engineering, which is what this petition or resolution allows us to use those for this year's inspections. Last year, we used Clark Engineering for the other half of our inspections. So we split our bridges into 2 groups, and each group has roughly the same amount of bridges in it. And so this is just engaging the DOT to do our annual inspections.
Do we have some annually? So are they done every 2 years then, or?
Correct, yep.
Just a question, can we rotate that so different people, different engineers inspect it, or are they always inspecting the same bridges, or?
They are always inspecting the same bridges, yep.
Okay, I just thought maybe it makes sense to have somebody else, in case somebody missed something.
Well, at one time, I think just Austin was doing inspections, and that's now
That's
changed
correct,
recently.
because at the last inspection, we had Clark Engineering take a look at some, which had only been inspected by Austin Engineering.
Yeah, that was Clark's first time, right?
That's exactly
Yep.
right, and they did a great presentation, if you recall that. Okay, so I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Beth, second by Mike. Any questions on this, you guys? Something we have to do. Okay, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 7, authorization for the mayor to sign a contract for design services with Evergreen Skate Parks LLC for the skate park project in the amount of $12,500. Jay, I'll let you talk about this a little bit.
Okay, well, as you know, the present skate park that we have is located in a residential community, and it's not very popular in that community, so we wish to relocate that. One of the areas that's in consideration now would be the parking lot near Cook Complex, south of the existing Sunchase Apartments. And a resident and a skateboard enthusiast from Watertown here kind of put us in contact with the Evergreen Skate Parks. They build an all-concrete skate park, and that's kind of the art of skate parks anymore. So, and we've been in contact with them and really like some of the work that they've done, so would really like to enter into a contract with them.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. I think there'd be some questions for you.
So moved.
Motion by Bill, second by Dan. Any questions for Jay?
This is just a fee for the design?
Yes. And they would also come out here and have an on-site visit whereby we would wish to get the skate park community together and go through it with them so we can design something that the skateboarders in the community would really wish to see.
Jay, does that include the engineering as well?
Yeah.
So it's everything, it would be the whole layout, the plan, the
Yep,
drawings? Okay.
Yeah, I think moving the skate park's the right thing to do. The question that's come up in my conversations is that an activity that's increasing or decreasing? Is that something where there's enough interest the city should invest in a new park?
I don't think, I would say there would probably be a core group of probably 2 dozen to 30 people that are regular users, but then there's a host of occasional users that like to take the kids down there. Some of the parents I've talked to, they like to go down there with their kids and that type of thing. I can't really say it's increasing. I don't really think it's decreasing, but a state-of-the-art facility, I could see this almost as kind of a destination skate park because there's not many around.
It will be. The kids that are doing this, they go to Sisseton now, they go north to do this. A lot of bike enthusiasts come out and ride these things. So it's more than just the skateboards.
What's our budget on this?
That's what I was going to ask.
Total budget is 185, $185,000.
Okay, and this company is aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, and were there fees based on a percentage of the project, or what was it based on?
Basically, it wasn't based on a percentage. It was just something that we contacted them. We had done the RFP earlier, and I kind of messed that up a little bit. Kind of did a design build, and we need the design bid build, so kind of went back to the drawing board, and they actually reduced their cost from what the original RFP looked like.
Now, did I hear something about a private donation here several months back? Is that still on the table, or?
There was a private donor going to come in with, I believe, $30,000. We had kind of looked at using that. I think there was some things that happened that maybe how do I say it right? They got a little ticked off at something else and decided to pull out at this particular time. So we're looking at our budget process, and that's kind of where we're going to go. Any other questions?
Well, I think Don's got a valid point. I don't know anything about it other than probably the hospital likes having it because of the broken arms and legs. But how do we quantify the use of something like this? I know we have it today, but how do we quantify it, Jay?
We do have it today. I'm going to throw this out there for you, though, Mike. I mean, this would have been the time during budget hearings that we would have said, no, we don't want to do that, when the council voted unanimously to do a skate park. And they put the dollars into the budget, the $185,000. We've had it out there that we're going to do this. I think this is not the time to question that we're not going to do it when we've had that discussion. We really have. And I think that the school absolutely wants us out of that area. They do not want us. In fact, we've had emails from Leslie. We've had messages from a whole lot of folks to get it out of there.
Just to follow up, I respect your comments, Mr. Mayor, but when we do put it in the budget, that's a lot of time when the public finds out about it and the questions come up. So very respectful of what you said, but that's why the questions do come up. I do think that thing needs to be moved, and I just want to validate that there is a need for it. And once it got out there in the public, then the questions came in. I just want to be able to respond to those.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 8, consideration of bids received for the Cook Complex Extension Center parking lot. This is a reconstruction project. We're all aware of this. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by John, second by Dan. Do you want to handle this one a little bit, Shane? Kind of give us an idea when you're going to do it. We got a lot of ball games out there. We don't want to interfere with everything. So,
Okay.
And then maybe the cost. It kind of just go through the whole thing.
Yep. Okay, so we did receive 2 bids, one from Clausen, which was the low bid, and a second one from McLaughlin and Schultz. Both of those were under our engineer's estimate, which was a good sign. The low bidder was 15% below the estimate. A portion of the project does include work that the county had committed funding to, and the bids came in such that we're below their portion of the project as well, so we don't see any reason to see any non-participation from the county. So with that, the project is scheduled for fall. We're looking at approximately an August 10th date for starting, and if need be, we may entertain starting sooner than that if possible, but we do want to minimize the conflicts with current uses throughout the summer. So with that, if there's any other specific questions, that's all I have.
What I'll do, Shane, is I'll look for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Oh, I've already got it?
You
already?
did
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So then, got any questions for Shane on this then, anybody?
Shane, what's the total extent, of this?
Okay.
I'm kind of lost looking at it here, so.
Yep, I have a drawing, or that area up on my screen here. I'll have them put it up. So the city's main portion is, you can see where this changes colors, and that's because this area up here had some previous maintenance work done on it. This area down to the south is what the city's committed to total reconstruct. We're going to take all the pavement off of this area, regrade it, put some fresh gravel down, and repave that. North of there, you can see all the wet spots from the previous spring's drainage, and those are the areas where that asphalt parking lot are breaking up to the north. So what we're gonna do is go in these and cut little patches out and fix the broken up areas, and then leave it in a state that we can overlay the whole parking lot with 1.5 inches. So the whole parking lot will look brand new when we're done with the initial appearance. Now what you will see is reflective cracking on this north half will start to show up probably the following spring. That's normal with an overlay and to be expected. So if anybody complains about some cracking up there, you know, in the next year or two, that's expected. But the south half will be completely reconstructed, and that is actually almost to the state where it's essentially a rough gravel road right now. But
So is that gonna take care of the drainage up there by the extension building?
we are trying to regrade that to get some of that water out. It's a very difficult site to do that without totally replacing the whole asphalt surface, but we think we've got identified how to get that water out of there.
Shane, I have a question for you. On the south end, on the southeast corner, where that goes through the fence, you know, where they enter through the fence?
Yep.
Are you intending to asphalt that up to the concrete?
Um,
It's kind of a dirt gravel.
We could probably add that on. Our primary focus has been the parking lot itself, but if you're talking this area right
It gets
here,
real muddy, and so if there's any way we could include
it looks
that.
like we would have budget. We could probably get that done.
Thank you.
If I could, I would also request that we make it clear that that's not a practice for semis out there. You know, they're learning how to drive in this area, and it destroys that 1.5 inches of asphalt. It
As I
can't
understand,
take it.
Yep. As I understand it, I think they've changed their location for that.
Good.
I
Maybe
heard.
we need to have some signage out there
Yeah,
or
okay.
something that just does not allow those big trucks
Sure.
in there.
Sure, we could sign that.
I'm not saying that.
So,
Okay.
anything else?
I gotta compose myself here a little bit. Okay, so we have a motion, and a second on the floor, and no further discussion. I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Under old business, I am going to throw this out. We do want to go out for the SCADA grant again. If you recall, the SCADA grant is for the small communities on the airline for the advertising and things. So when we get our new airline in here in August, we'll be prepared to do the advertising. This is coming to us from the airport board. If you remember, we did go out for this grant 6 months or so ago. We had no airline, so at that particular time, they turned us down. It's a $120,000 grant that we're going to be asking for, and the city of Watertown would be responsible for a $20,000 share. I would ask that you allow me to at least apply for this grant and see where the feds go with it. So I would look for a motion as second. Motion by Bruce.
Second.
Second by Bill. Any questions on that? Hearing none, I'll look for council action on that. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I don't have any other old business. Anybody else got something you want to bring up?
I don't know if it'd fall under old business or probably just some open discussion. If a lot of people noticed, we do have some issues with the new banners we put up. Quite a few of them have gone down already. We are working with the manufacturer. First, I want to get them all collected together so we can get some pictures, but we will be working with the manufacturer, see what we can't do to resolve that issue. So just if anybody asks you, we're working on it. So one other thing, Watertown Area Transit, I don't know if you saw in the paper, did receive $5,000 from the county to go toward the new buses also. So their request from us, of course, will lower by that amount. So
I also wanted to mention that under new business, we will be having a council meeting April 27th. It'll be a special meeting at noon. This will be on the decision that you folks will have to make on airlines. We will, I believe we're having a couple airlines coming in. I forget which exactly one, but on the 20th there will be an airline aircraft flying in. that we can take a look at. There'll probably be 2 of them that day, and on the 21st, there'll be another aircraft coming in to take a look at that. You as council members will get a notice, so you'll be able to get in and look at the aircraft. I believe with one of them, they're going to give some rides.
Can I drive?
Anybody else?
Can I drive?
Anybody else will be able to look from the fence and see what type of units coming in. Whenever the 20th and 21st is, yeah, that's like this week, guys. Yeah.
What's the time of the council meeting on the 27th?
Noon.
Noon.
And we would expect a decision at that particular time the council will make on which aircraft or which air company you want to bring to Watertown. And we'll send out notice. Yes, Lisa.
Yes, I do have something under old business. The last council meeting,
I'm sorry, you're too late. We passed that. No.
At the last council meeting, all of you approved a land lease for Airco Inc. As you know, Scott and Donna Thompson bought the building, and then we had a land lease issued for Airco Inc. They have requested that they would like that land lease to be in the name of Scott and Donna Thompson Living Trust. And based on the language of the motion, we would need a new motion to just change the contracting party name. The remainder of the contract stayed the same.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll look for a motion.
I'll make
Second
that
for
motion.
Motion by Randy.
Second.
Second by Flynn. Is there any questions on how she's doing this or what's going on?
Just a name change.
Correct. Just a name change.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anybody else on new business or liaison reports?
I don't know if this falls probably more under old business, and it's not too big of a deal. I did have a call this week about the roundabout, and the person that called me was happy with the roundabout, but thought that maybe we need to educate a few more people to who's got a right-of-way within the roundabout. So I don't know how we go about educating people on that, but
I think
otherwise,
we're gonna
I've
pick
been
up
on that
the-
roundabout a lot and had no problems with it, quite honestly, at all. But I don't go round and round, though. I tend to get an exit. But her problem was that somebody's and if somebody else cuts in front, then they should just to the left. I believe that person's supposed to have the right. We got to let that person through if they're already on there. So, if nothing else, maybe through those that watch, maybe somebody will get the hint.
Mike, you want to give a little update on the community center? We were up there just recently, just kind of give you guys a heads up on that.
Well, that project is, I believe they've got all the internal concrete work done with the exception of the pool area. They've got all of the internal, for lack of better terms, all of the internal studding work done and a lot of sheetrock type work done. They continue to do the other infrastructure items as far as the HVAC and such on that. It seems to be going along well. The biggest holdup right now is, I know it's going to sound odd, but between the wind and the cold temperatures, they haven't been able to finish the roof on the pool area, which, and I'm going to use the word may, slow the startup of that construction of the pool back a little bit till they can get that done. So otherwise, everything seems to be going pretty well. We continue to, we fall behind a little bit and then we make it up in the schedule, but it looks like we're on schedule overall. So.
Perfect, thank you. Bruce, you want to give a little update on the ball diamond, or John, either one of you?
Sure. I guess I was out last week and looked at them. I noticed they've got, it appears to be the majority of the grading done. They've got the footings in for the concession area, the storage, the umpire area. The lights are all up at this point, I think. But they're still working on, it looks to me like they're still working on some of the grading that they're going to have to get accomplished. I don't know. They're talking about, I think, June at the earliest, perhaps July for seeding. And right now, what they're still saying is that we're up to speed for opening it up for play in the spring next year. So things are tracking along pretty well out there. Weather's been good to us.
They have started on the fencing area this week, as far as fencing all the stuff around the outside, so. The grading they might have to redo because I think I ate half of it while I was working down the street the other day in that south wind, but.
Yeah, it's been, that wind has been rough on those guys out there, all that open dirt.
John, you got anything to add to that? Dan, go ahead.
just really two things. Number one, last Thursday, we met at the Uptown Renewal Board and were presented the Charette's bulletin or the book that you have in front of you. It looks kind of ominous, but I think we decided that if you would just read the first 13 pages, that gives an overview. So it isn't quite so bad then. And the good news is that the city is already really in line to start doing some of the things that they are suggesting that we do for the first year. So we have a little time, but if I'm remembering, Nancy is going to come on our work session on the 3rd of May, is that right, Shelley? 2nd of May. So if you've read that first 13 pages, though, that would be appreciated, because she'll be making reference to that. So just the front part. And then the second thing is we did go on the gun range excursion to Garrettson and to Brookings on Friday. And, you know, it's a Duke's mixture. They've got, Garrettson has 1,000 members using a gun range in Garrettson, but it's pretty average. And then Brookings has a really fancy, they have a handgun range with an archery range, basically, and that's really extravagant. So I think it was good for all of us to see it, and, you know, I don't know what else will be done, but anyway, it's moving forward.
And you did put a task force together, I think, on that's
Right.
going to be working on it.
They did.
Anybody else? I wanted to mention, you know, you talk about the charrette and some of the things. I think, Shane, you've got some parking lots that are on schedule that'll be worked on this summer. We'll do that in a couple different phases. They're all budgeted for, ready to go, bid it out.
And that's in the first part of that charrette study.
It is.
To do that, so
That's
that's
gonna
going
look
to be a
very
nice
nice.
thing to be able to show that we're getting something done.
We haven't bid out the alley and parking lots yet, but we're headed towards advertisement this weekend. So Saturday, we plan on advertising. We'll collect bids about 2 weeks and bring forward the recommendation for you guys at the second meeting in May.
Shane, they're gonna do that a little differently this year, if I remember right. They're gonna let the utilities go in and do most of their stuff first, and then.
Correct, yep.
So we don't run into the drainage issues and stuff
Right,
like
we're
we
gonna
did.
let them go first. Sometime in July, we'll start the alley reconstruction and then incorporate the parking lot improvements along with that, so.
One of the really nice things about having the architects come up on the next work session is that they have a really good understanding and are going to share with us that whole concept of the public-private funding partnership. And so while we're taking care of some of these infrastructure city responsibilities, they also know how to work this into the same thing where the private sector comes in and maybe adds some other things to make it more attractive, things like that surrounding it. So I like the idea that we'll get a little bit more information on how do you bring the public and private sector together.
I can honestly say, and maybe I just pay more attention to it being on the Urban Renewal Board, but I can honestly say over the last couple of years, I think I'm starting to see more and more cars downtown all the time, a lot during the evening hours, just a lot of great things going on downtown, so.
I would agree, and then I know that Donis Roberts is opening up a new store uptown. I think it's DDR Books is moving in there, and that'll be very nice. I just wanted to make sure the public understands, we had a long discussion on our work session tonight on Stony Point, and Shane, you're going to be putting the group together. We need to have more discussion. The sooner the better on that. I would say if we can get it done next week, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can or not.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit after the meeting. We'll probably schedule a couple of go-to meetings where everybody can kind of sit in their own city but still see each other and converse and get through the first steps, and then we'd probably get together after that and then also engage the council in a meeting. I think that's how it'll progress, but we'll try to do that on as quick a timeline as we can all agree to with all the parties.
I think we heard it pretty clear tonight during the thing, the water quantity and quality. I think we can work through that. You're still there's a hurdle for the developer on on the channel, and we need to understand that
Correct.
extremely well.
Correct. Say, I do have a couple other things if the council wants to entertain it. One thing that we've been working on is a memorandum of understanding between the GLE and the city with regard to the design and construction of the bridge on South Broadway. We've gotten to the point where now the vacation will be proceeding, or has proceeded past its dates of limitations for protesting and so forth. So in essence, the vacation is complete. With regard to that, then we've prepared this memorandum to identify and define the responsibilities of what GLE has agreed to do and what the cities are agreed to accept from them. Lisa just passed out a copy of the memorandum to you. This was kind of previously authorized to prepare this document, so I just want to bring that forward for your discussion.
I think what we'll do is we'll have, I think Glacial Lakes will have an opportunity to look at this, make any changes if there's anything that
Correct.
would be brought forward to the council.
Yep.
Ask for me to get authorization to sign that.
Yep, but we wanted you to all see
Yeah,
this.
I think it's good to know. I think,
Yep.
you know, in listening to their discussions and all the discussions we had, it covers, I think it thoroughly covers it.
Okay. Just give you a brief update on the Highway 81 construction. We'll have a meeting again this week, of course, on Wednesdays. Current detour is still continuing to use 2nd Avenue over to 3rd Avenue up to 4th Avenue, or 3rd Street, excuse me, to 4th Avenue and then back over to Highway 81. We did experience some confusion by the general public on operating through the detour and identified those issues fairly quickly. So by the end of day 2, we had modified the detour to include 2 sets of stop signs, one on the north end and one on the south end, and that gives people an extra opportunity to stop and review the oncoming traffic and make a safer decision. So we applaud that effort and got that done. That detour will be in place for approximately 3 weeks. So sometime towards the end of May, we'll transition into the phase 2 of the detour, which will then utilize 3rd Avenue going east over to 11th Street, then north to 10th Avenue, and then back west to Highway 81. So we'll continue to provide updates, especially when we get to those phases where we'll change the traffic pattern. But if there's any questions, I can certainly try to answer.
I do have a quick question. On 10th Avenue, where we're putting in the new stoplights, the question's been posed to me many times. Are we putting in those weight, whatever it is, to change the light? Did they do that when they had 10th Avenue tore up, or what is the light going to be up there?
There is, they're called detection loops. They are putting detector loops in, which elevates the level of service that you can manipulate how those traffic lights operate. So in other words, if you know that you're not giving the 10th Avenue traffic enough time, by having those detection loops in there, you can adjust the time frame, maybe give them another 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. Or if that's too much time, then and the traffic's backing up on Highway 81, you can reverse that pattern and give them, less time. So it's a good thing to have the detector loops in there. It gives you more options on how to manipulate the traffic. Is that what you?
So Shane, I want to understand, are they just for information?
No.
Just feed you
Nope.
information, or they actually do?
It detects when it's like a metal detector. You drive over it, it activates that loop, and it starts a timer in the cabinet, and the cabinet then, it has to cycle through the light to get from green to red or red to green, and then it sits there and it activates a timing sequence for how long that turning movement or traffic movement is allowed, and then it switches back to its mandatory normal one, which is, Highway 81 is always going to dominate those intersections. So then it'll go back to the cycle where 81 dominates. But what the good part about it is if somebody's coming up on 10th Avenue, and the same thing will be true in 14th Avenue, rather than have to wait with nobody coming from the south or the north, it may activate the light sooner so that they can proceed through without waiting for a timing operation, so to speak. But
Shane, are they putting, especially coming westbound on 10th, are they putting any kind of turning lanes in there? Or?
I'd have to go review those plans in detail. I couldn't answer that one.
I have a, well, more of an FYI than anything else, but on First Avenue South as it comes to 19th Street, right where Casey's and Home Federal is, there are the dominant times for that intersection, you know, the noon hour, the 5 o'clock time frame, where the traffic is backed up for a block and a half or more to the west because there's no turning lane. It's the turning lane is what's creating the problem. There is no turning light there to go north. I don't see it as much coming from the east because people go the other way. They typically don't come so much and take a left-hand turn as much coming from the east. But coming from the west and then turning north on 19th, there is a long backup of traffic there, and it's just getting worse and worse. I don't know if there's something we can do with that or if we need to look at a turning arrow on that, but that's just an FYI. I've really noticed it as bad lately, so.
I'll visit with the street department staff. They do the improvements or manage those systems, and we'll review it. As far as I can tell, that does not have the actuated lights, so it's probably on a timing sequence, and if that timing sequence is set too long in any one direction, traffic can back up, especially during peak times. But we can certainly maybe set somebody out there and observe how bad that backup is for a week, or just during the peak times. I wouldn't do it all day, but kind of look at it.
I already gave that to you.
Okay. Just quickly, give us a little update on the IMP, if you can do that.
The pavement management study. The company IMS, if you saw their van driving around last week, they were in town and they successfully drove through our whole system by Saturday. So at least the visual data collecting sequence of that process is completed. We did, if you recall, in a recent council meeting, add another element to that design study, and that was deflection testing. So they'll come back through with another machine that will then kind of send a sound signal through the pavement, and as they define how solid and sound the pavement structure along with the base is, and that'll give us a better indicator of how well designed or how our streets are performing from that aspect. And they'll do that later in May or first part of June, and then we hope to have all the data compressed into a report. Hopefully sometime in July we'll receive that report.
Okay, and just one other thing, kind of on that same thing, FJ McLaughlin, maybe you can mention to the guys.
Okay, I'm assuming this is public knowledge because I was asked directly by the owner. McLaughlin Schultz has received an offer for purchase, and sometime this summer we expect that purchase to be complete. The city does have one or two contracts currently with McLaughlin Schultz, and the attorney and I will work out whatever paperwork we need to do to transfer those from one company to the next. But we look forward to working with Dunnick Brothers Incorporated, purchased that operation, and I've worked with them on many projects in Minnesota, and I think we'll be able to work with them successfully here as well.
I think so too, and if they do the kind of work they did at the golf course, I think we'll be very, very happy at that. Anything else you guys want to mention? Otherwise, I got one thing I want to throw out there. I had an opportunity. I was on a date Saturday night. I took two little girls, 10 years old, to the Northeast Shrine father-daughter dance, and had a blast. And there was about 75 little girls and kids running around, and it was a good time. One granddaughter and a friend of hers, yeah.
Steve, you mentioned the golf course. I think that renovation process in the clubhouse is finished and it is turning out very, very nice. I think it might be done though, I think.
Yeah, the golf course renovation at the clubhouse is done, and it turned out great. I tell you, the guys that worked on it, Mike was one, and we had Jay. Jay, you were very instrumental in that. The black ceilings, the colors, it really did work out very, very nicely.
I stopped by there yesterday when I was driving around the lake, just stuck my head in the door just because everybody said how great it looked, which it did, but everybody was looking at me like saying, what's he doing at the golf course? So they're all ready to yell for. So.
Can I just want to ask one question, Shane. There was discussion earlier, let me regress just a moment on the Stony Point thing. There was some talk about having some folks from SDSU, the fisheries people. When are we still planning on doing that? And if so, when would they be addressing our group?
Right, and I think that's one of the two things that we haven't handled yet is the channel and the impacts on the wetlands and the fisheries. And I think we'll also need to determine a time to gather those folks in and have that discussion. One thing that we may bump our nose in, and we should probably be conscientious of that, is the timing of our process from the Planning Commission, and they did act on it. I will ask Lisa to help me interpret whether or not that action then needs, if that delays the timeline or what its impact is on the timeline. But we do need to be conscious of making a decision. And
yeah, I think that timeline, I think that clock started ticking once the Planning Commission sent it up here, so we need to be pretty adamant getting this done.
As a follow-up to that, there's actually 2 resolutions passed that Planning Commission. Which one takes?
Well, it's not about the resolution per se. It's about the plats.
Oh,
that's right. Our laws are there's a moratorium on how long you can hold a plat before action gets taken on it. And I think now one thing we could do is touch base with the developer and see if he's okay extending that period of time. And I think we should define that and probably, if nothing else, maybe bring him in, make a subsequent motion that extends a time frame.
Right. But right now, we've got about 35, 40 days left, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, and we do have to be conscious of that.
Yeah.
So,
is there any need to go into executive session? No? Okay, I'll look for a motion, a second for adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mike, second by Glenn. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.